This is Jackanory Jr. Hello, I'm Sean. This is a story from the island of Sodor that features Thomas the Tank Engine and his friends. This story is called Hero of the Rails. It was a beautiful summer's day on Sodor. Thomas was enjoying the quiet sunshine when suddenly, all over the island, there was not a moment's peace. It could only mean one thing. Spencer had arrived. Thomas told Spencer he didn't need to be so loud. But Spencer just laughed and said only slow engines were quiet. He challenged Thomas to a race, starting from the shunting yard. Thomas didn't know what to do. He had to accept the challenge, and he had to win in order for him to not look like a fool in front of the other engines. At the shunting yard, Thomas and Spencer were loaded with heavy trucks. When they were both ready, the race began. Thomas struggled to pull his heavy load up the steep hill, but once he made it to the top, disaster! His brakes had broken. Faster and faster he went, into a flatbed of jam barrels. A lot of it splattered onto Thomas, but still he went on and onto an old overgrown track. Finally, he stopped, covered in muck, branches, and sticky jam. Then he heard a voice. It was an old and rusty engine he'd never seen before. His name was Hero. His home was an island far away called Japan, where they called him Master of the Railway. Hero had come to Sodor a long time ago, but had broken down and been left on this line and forgotten. Thomas wanted to tell the Fat Controller, Sir Topham Hatt, about Hero, but Hero was worried that if Sir Topham Hatt found him broken down, he would be sent to the smelter's yard, which, if you didn't know, is an engine's worst fear on the island of Sodor. Thomas promised his new friend that he would find parts and make him a really useful engine again. Thomas was soon found and brought to the steamworks to get fixed and cleaned up. That night, Thomas told the other engines about his new friend. They all agreed to help Hero. The next morning, Thomas returned to the steamworks and found an old piston. Victor said he could take it, so Thomas took the part straight to Hero's hiding place, and his driver and fireman fitted the new part onto the old engine. In the meantime, Percy kindly agreed to do some of Thomas's work, so Thomas could find some more parts for Hero. Percy knew that he had to be very careful not to let Spencer find out about Hero, or he would try to get him scrapped. Unfortunately, Percy didn't get very far. He popped a valve while pulling some heavy farm machinery that Thomas was supposed to take. Thomas helped his friend to the steamworks, so now it was Percy that needed a new part. But he was soon fixed, and Thomas told Victor about Hero. Victor told them he had more parts they could use, if only they could carry them to his hiding place. Meanwhile, Sir Topham Hatt was puzzled why the engines were carrying the wrong trucks, but as long as the work was done, he didn't mind. Percy was right to worry about Spencer. He knew Thomas was up to something and started watching his every move. Thomas couldn't visit Hero without Spencer noticing, but he had an idea. He could ask Percy to take the next part to Hero, but first they both had to race away from Spencer so he wouldn't hear their plan. When it was established, Percy collected the part and took it to Hero. He was amazed by the old engine. Hero was very pleased to meet Thomas's best friend. Spencer tried to find out what Thomas was up to by asking Emily, but she wouldn't speak to him until she'd finished her shunting. While Spencer was distracted, Thomas collected the next part for Hero. Suddenly, Spencer appeared nearby. Luckily, Mavis saw him first and distracted him with a tour of the quarry. If you haven't been to a quarry before, one thing you should know is that it can be a very dirty place. Spencer ended up under a hopper where slate and dust flew down his funnel and bounced off his boiler. He was so messy he had to go to the steamworks to get fixed, which meant that Thomas and Percy could spend the rest of the day helping Hero. After his quarry visit, Spencer was so battered he needed a new coat of shiny silver paint. But it wasn't long before he was a splendid silver engine again and set out to find Thomas. Spencer looked around and tried to work out what all the engines were doing. He was getting nearer and nearer to Hero's hiding place. Luckily, James and Toby were with Hero. Toby decided to hold on while James tried to chase Spencer away. And he succeeded too. With Spencer heading in the wrong direction, Hero's hiding place was safe. For now, anyway. Now that most of his parts had been repaired, Hero was feeling much better. It was time for a test run. While they waited for Hero's steam to build up, Thomas told his friend about his past adventures on Sodor. There was the time he got covered in flour and looked like a Halloween ghost, and the time when he helped to restore the long-lost town of Great Waterton. And who could forget the time a photographer came to take a picture of everyone on Sodor? Hero was most intrigued by Thomas's adventures. Soon, Hero had enough steam in his boiler, so Thomas brought him for a test run on the main line. But what started out as a pleasant puff down the track turned into a race for survival because Thomas and Hero heard Spencer coming. Hero tried to go as fast as he could, but it was no good. Spencer quickly caught up with them. As Hero tried to go faster, the new parts began to fall off. Hero was breaking down again. Spencer laughed triumphantly, calling Hero a heap of scrap. Thomas was worried. He knew now Spencer would tell Sir Topham Hatt. Suddenly, Gordon steamed past and called Spencer a slow coach. Spencer couldn't resist a challenge. Gordon beat Spencer in that race to Maithwaite Station, where Sir Topham Hatt was standing on the platform. Before Spencer could say anything, Sir Topham Hatt reprimanded him for racing and sent him back to work. Thomas hid Hero in a siding and promised to come and see him as soon as he'd finished his work. Thomas had to finish his shunting before he could return to Hero, so he did it as quickly as he could. In no time, his work was finished, so he could finally go and check up on Hero. The old engine was not feeling at all well. Going so fast had caused many of his new parts to fail. Thomas decided that he would have to convince Sir Topham Hatt to fix Hero. But now Spencer had finished his work too. He was going to tell Sir Topham Hatt that Hero should be scrapped. Who would tell their story to Sir Topham Hatt first? As they raced along, Thomas went down the Fenland track, which had a wooden bridge over some muddy marshlands. Thomas knew it was a risk, but it was the quickest way to Knapford Station, so he raced ahead. Unfortunately, the track couldn't support Spencer's weight. With a mighty splash, Spencer slid into the mud. Thomas arrived at Knapford Station, where he nervously told Sir Topham Hatt about Hero. He begged him not to send him to the smelter's yard. Sir Topham Hatt was amazed and surprised that Thomas would even think he would scrap Hero. He called him Master of the Railway and ordered him to be fixed straight away. Thomas and Percy helped Hero to the steamworks. Victor and Kevin had a good look around to find all the parts they needed to fix him completely. Once all the parts were sorted, it was time to fix Hero. It didn't take that long, and an audience had gathered just outside the steamworks. The engines gasped. Hero looked as good as new. But he couldn't stop to admire his new parts. He knew he had a job to do. Using all his strength, Hero pulled Spencer away from the mud and brought him back to the steamworks. It's safe to say that I think he needed a good wash after that. Spencer was so grateful that Thomas and Hero had helped him that he said sorry and promised to be a good friend from now on. Hero enjoyed being a really useful engine on Sodor, but he still felt sad. He missed his home in Japan. That night, Thomas told Sir Topham Hatt that Hero was homesick. He agreed that if it would make him happy, Hero could go home. He also said that for rescuing Hero, Thomas could have a fresh coat of paint. All too soon, it was time for Hero to go home. He steamed around Sodor one last time, remembering all the places he'd been and friends he made. The journey ended at Brendam Docks, where all the engines had gathered in to say goodbye. Thomas and Hero didn't know when they would meet again, but they knew they would never forget each other. And rightfully so, as I guess you could say this was a historical moment on Sodor. Not only did Thomas find a long-lost engine and restore him to his former glory, but the Duke and Duchess of Boxford, whom Spencer was their private engine, had also made a new summer house, which was why Spencer was on Sodor in the first place. The other engines never forgot about Hero, and only a year later he came back to work on their railway for a few weeks. But that's another story, and I think I'll leave it here. Bye for now.